This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
This is a Bose moment. You've been there before. Somebody's apartment, small talk that's going nowhere, plastic cup that's almost empty. It's not great. Then someone hits play on a Bose speaker. Heads nod, feet tap, one person dances, then everyone does. Awkward becomes electric. When Bose sound fills the room, you don't just hear the music, you feel it. Your life deserves music. Your music deserves Bose. Find your perfect product at Bose.com.
Your new hair era is here. At Sephora, you'll find carefully selected hair care products that work for your hair and take it to the next level. Your search for dream hair is over. Sephora is the place for hair care. Discover the best products that give your hair the treatment it needs from brands like Kerastase, K18, and Gisou. Plus, with free shipping and same-day delivery, there's never been a better time to trade up to healthier-looking hair. Shop hair at Sephora.
Welcome to Generals of World War II, The Art of Command. I am your host, John Viscardo, and with me once again is the fabulous, brilliant, retired Colonel, Kris Thompson. For those of you who don't know Kris, he's been on our episodes before. We did an episode on Creighton Abrams. We did another one on Heinz Guderian. And who are we discussing today, Kris?
Erwin Rommel. And if you want to talk about the art of command of World War II, this is the ultimate subject matter.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, I do want to recommend a website and a cause that Kris is heavily involved in. That's the National Armor and Cavalry Heritage Foundation. You can find their website at Armor Cavalry Heritage Foundation, one word, .org. And Kris, what is that about?
So our organization, I'm on the board of trustees for this group. It's a 501 charitable group, and we're responsible for maintaining and refurbishing the historic armored vehicles that are in the possession of the U.S. Army, most of them. And we have about 300 historic armored vehicles in two huge warehouses at Fort Benning. It's open to the public. And for the World War II fans, we have all the top tanks from World War II, German, Russian, American. But the government does not pay to refurbish these. It's a privately funded effort. And so we always need donations. We'd like people to come by and see the collection. Again, it's open, and you can see the schedule on our website. But we also ask for donations on that same website.
Yeah, I highly recommend you check it out. Really interesting things there. And if you're in Fort Benning, please check that out as well. And the website is armorcavalryheritagefoundation.org.
Yes, sir.
Do you love the generals of World War II and have a team that wants to become better leaders? Then here's a new partner of the podcast that I think you'll be interested in. The 5Co Consulting Group develops stronger leaders by turning the battlefields of World War II into immersive leadership classrooms. The company is led by retired U.S. Army Colonel David Fivecoat, a longtime fan of this podcast who has spent decades developing military and corporate leaders. Imagine walking with your team across the Normandy battlefield, where leaders face their hardest tests, standing on Omaha Beach to study Coda's leadership under pressure, surveying Rommel's struggle to lead upwards, following Gavin at La Fière to understand decision-making in crisis, and examining Eisenhower's command decisions to see how leaders build trust and lead when the stakes could not be higher. This isn't a battlefield tour. It's a tailored leadership experience that connects the timeless lessons of World War II to today's business challenges. Visit the 5coconsultinggroup.com because the best leadership classroom was built 80 years ago. All right, let's dive into one of the greatest generals to come out of World War II, and that is Erwin Rommel. He was born November 15th, 1891 in Heidenheim, Germany, into a middle-class family. His father was a school teacher. What was his upbringing like?
So his dad spent a career as a school teacher. He was a high school principal during Rommel's upbringing. This is in Swabia, which is a part of Württemberg in Germany. And the Swabians are known as very stolid, very unemotional, frugal, and careful. He was described by his older sister as being kind of a dreamy child. But then in adolescence, he starts taking up hiking and bicycling and skiing and became somewhat athletic. And so you get the feeling that he kind of came into his own as an adolescent and oriented on the outside or on outside activity. But he was kind of a slight build, kind of a wiry young man. But his sister, even with that small build, he was never afraid of anybody.
Yeah, he joins the German Army in 1910 as an officer cadet in the 124th Württemberg Infantry Regiment. But why do you think he chose a career in the military? He's not like from the Prussian military hierarchy.
He wanted actually to go to the Zeppelin works and work on the Zeppelins. And this, of course, is pre-World War I. But his dad vetoed it and suggested that he join the Army, which is interesting, although pre-World War I, the Army was still a very honored profession in Germany. And I think his dad maybe sensed kind of that outdoorsy kind of hiking, biking, skiing, aptitude would stand him in good stead. So he serves as an enlisted man for a year, which he had to do. And then you go to cadet school, which he did. And he met his future wife there at a Kriegschule. It's called the Kriegschule in Danzig. So really nothing stands out from that point in time other than he was into it. He was fully devoted to the profession.
Yeah, now we're going to get into the art of command, kind of how he became this leader. And maybe it was just his father being a school teacher and, teaching methods, but we'll get into it. He serves with distinction in World War I, fighting in France, Romania, and Italy, earning a reputation for courage and aggressive leadership. So do you think he just had a natural talent, or was he a fast learner?
I think it was both. And I think it's a great question because, some great commanders do it by instinct. Some do it by learning and skills and aptitude and all. But with Rommel, I think he was a natural. He in this infantry battalion that he went to, served in France, served in Austria, served in Italy, back to France, back to Italy. But all the time, he had there's a concept called coup d'oeil, which is a French term, which says a commander who's got the ability to see the terrain, see the enemy, and make an instinctual decision on the right thing to do. And if there's anybody that ever had coup d'oeil, it is Erwin Rommel. And that was there from the beginning. The other interesting thing about his background is Rommel, remember, he's Swabian, not Prussian. He was a fan of Napoleon. And throughout his junior officer years, he had a picture of Napoleon on his wall, not Frederick the Great, which I'm sure every Prussian officer had on his wall. And so I think, that was kind of his staking out where he was in terms of versus the Prussians. The other thing is his tactics, like in France, were pure Napoleon, is because whether it was a platoon or a company or a battalion, he would mass his machine guns and devastate the enemy with massive machine gun fire, break in, turn the flanks, and then penetrate. I mean, it's pure Napoleonic warfare.
Perfect segue. In case you're listening to this podcast and are unaware, we also have another podcast called Generals in Napoleon that I'd highly recommend. One of Napoleon's favorite things was speed. He wanted fast generals, and Rommel was a very aggressive general.
He was, and he picked angles of attack. He picked covered routes into the enemy position. He would lead them. I mean, he would go right with his lead unit or when he was a platoon leader with his lead squad. I mean, it's extraordinary from the get-go how good he was. The best thing I think to describe him, I had a West Point guy, retired colonel I talked to, very good historian, very good tactician. He said the best thing about Rommel was he was the ultimate opportunist. when he saw an opening, he was all over it, like instantly. And I think that describes his World War I experience.
Yeah. During the war, he earns Germany's prestigious Pour le Mérite decoration for his actions on the Italian front. Do you know how he earned this?
I do. It's interesting. Now, the Blue Max, or the Pour le Mérite, is called the Blue Max, and it was Germany's highest award for valor. You had to have not just one event, it had to be a series of events in sequence with the highest level of courage and bravery. And it was called the Blue Max because that was the nickname, because it was most famous for being given to Max Immelmann, the famous German fighter pilot. And it was a cross, and it had a kind of a very bright blue color. You wore it around your neck. And he won it in 1917 on the Italian front during the Battle of Caporetto. He took his detachment of a few companies, like a machine gun company, a few rifle companies, and he captured a key mountaintop, Mount Matterhorn, which outflanked, and he could observe all the, they brought up the field artillery observers, basically unhinged the entire Italian position, which led to the famous retreat of Caporetto. The Blue Max was also made famous in a movie with George Papard, James Mason, and Ursula Andress called the Blue Max as well, so it's a pretty famous decoration. And Rommel got to wear it his whole career, even though it was a prior regime medal.
Yeah, it's with baubles that men are led, Napoleon.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Well, after World War I, he remained in the Army and became known as an excellent military instructor and tactician. In 1937, he published Infantry Attacks, a highly influential book based on his first World War I experiences. Is this similar to one of your favorite books, Guderian's book on tank warfare?
Sort of. But there are some distinctions here. So Rommel wrote that book because when he was a tactics instructor for the infantry, he wasn't happy with the then existing German, I guess you'd call them, what we call them field manuals, right? Tactics books on how to do things. So he wanted something that was more realistic. And I remember I read that when I was a junior officer. Fascinating read. He illustrates it with his own handwritten sketches or hand-drawn sketches. But the thing that you get from it, which you don't see like in a typical military field manual, is the flexibility, is adapting to the situation every moment that it occurs. And I think he talked about what you do when you get inside an enemy trench line. Do you go out to the flanks or do you penetrate? And so he covers all those situations. It is he emphasized the fluidity of infantry combat, which is very, very different, even, in World War I from the Prussian model of infantry combat. It was not as well read as the Guderian book, maybe not as famous, but it does tell you a lot about Rommel's mentality and the tactics that made him so famous.
Yeah, there's that great scene in Patton where I think he's like yelling across the lines to Rommel, like, "Hey, I read your book."
And he did. He read it. It's called Infantry Attacks. And as you say, the German words Infantry Anschluss or something like that. But it explains the tactics that Rommel used at every level of command throughout his career.
Yeah. What do we know about his personal life? Was he married? Did he have kids? Do we know what he did in his spare time?
Yeah, so he was married to a lady named Lucy that he married in 1916. He had a son named Manfred. Manfred turned out to be a very well-respected politician. I think he was the Lord Mayor of Stuttgart for 24 years. His wife, after Rommel's death, after World War II, spent a lot of time massaging Rommel's legacy and protecting it, from critics. Interestingly, Rommel also had a daughter from an affair that he had before he married Lucy. The daughter's name was Gertrude, but this says a lot about Lucy, I think, is that, and the daughter Gertrude corresponded back and forth with Rommel. I mean, this was an open relationship and familial bond there. But after Gertrude's mother died post-World War II, Lucy and Manfred kind of took her into the family. They called her a cousin, but they gave her, full credits as being a member of the family, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and they didn't have to do that, clearly.
No,
yeah.
That's right.
All right. So at the start of World War II, he commanded troops guarding Hitler's headquarters, which helped raise his profile within the German army. So do we know how he met Hitler and how he earned his trust so quickly?
We do. So Hitler, when they were getting ready to go into Poland in 1939, Hitler wanted to be up toward the front. He had an armored train for his command post, and he had some vehicles that he would move up to the front line in. And so Hitler handpicked Rommel. Now, remember, Hitler served in infantry units in World War I. And so I'm sure Rommel really appealed to him, holder of the Blue Max and his heroics. So Hitler handpicked Rommel to be the commander of the Führer Begleit battalion. Begleit is a German word meaning a company or escort. And so Rommel's job with his small battalion was to safeguard Hitler on the train and then be his escort unit when Hitler would go to the front or to travel around to see subordinate commanders. This was a very prestigious job. I mean, it essentially put Rommel in contact with Hitler daily throughout the Polish campaign. And
he controls access to who gets to Hitler. And Hitler probably liked that he wasn't part of the Prussian officer aristocracy. He was like a guy, like Hitler saw himself, who made it on his own.
Exactly. And Rommel was a very Hitler type of officer coming up on merit, right? And coming up the hard way in the ranks. It's interesting that Rommel also was in charge of Hitler's baggage, and Rommel's writings from that point in time, he was absolutely in love with Hitler during this time frame. And the more he saw him, the more he was convinced that Hitler was, in fact, a genius. And Hitler, of course, reciprocated that favorable attitude towards Rommel as well.
Yeah. Well, in 1940, Rommel took command of the 7th Panzer Division during the invasion of France. His division advanced so rapidly that it became known as the Ghost Division because even German headquarters often lost track of its location. So do you think he outperformed his peers in the invasion of France?
So this is a great topic for the thrust of your series here on the Art of Command. So here he is. He spent his whole career, 20 years, as an infantry officer. And now, because he is a Hitler favorite, he gets given a pretty juicy command position, commanding one of the Panzer divisions in the invasion of France. And so it took a lot, I think, for him to get up to speed on tanks and how tanks operate, what their capabilities are. The other difficulties were, in this particular division, he had one regiment of tanks, 3 battalions, but they were like Panzer 38s, Panzer 1s, Panzer 2s, just a few Panzer 4s. So they were kind of substandard tanks for the most part. And he had 2 motorized infantry regiments. So he had no Panzer Grenadiers, with infantry and half-tracks. This is all truck-mounted infantry. And then a motorcycle battalion. So with that, the best example of his extraordinary leadership, this is going to sound like Rambo, but it's Rommel's crossing of the Meuse at Dinant. So every Panzer division commander was given a thrust line, like an axis of advance. And Rommel's went through Dinant. I've been to Dinant. I've spent the night there. It has very steep river valleys, and it's like in Dinant itself, it's like a gorge. It's like high cliffs on one side and then a town on the other. But that's where Rommel was supposed to cross. The French blew the bridge. They had a French infantry division defending on the west bank of the Meuse. So check this out. This is Rommel's activity over a 24-hour period. So he gets there. His motorcycle battalion is shuffling onesies and twosies across the river near Dinant. He goes up, he sends his panzer regiment up the east bank, shooting over their left at the French positions to keep them suppressed. He gets to the 1st Infantry Regiment, which is the next unit north of Dinant, of his, and he goes across with one of the first 2 companies in a rubber boat as a division commander, and he takes command of that regiment. He steadies the infantry on the far bank, his units there, and brings more people over. Then he recrosses to the east bank on a rubber boat. He goes further up to the north to his other infantry regiment, and they've got a crossing pretty well established. And so they're putting in a light bridge. He takes command of the engineer company personally to put in a heavy bridge so he can start passing tanks over the heavy bridge. And then when he gets to some tanks on the west bank over that heavy bridge, he takes command of the Panzer Regiment, hops in a tank, and commands an attack on a wooded area just west of Dinant. I mean, this is extraordinary stuff when you talk about battlefield leadership.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer, and back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in 4 with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payin4. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
This is a Bose moment. You've been there before. Somebody's apartment, small talk that's going nowhere, plastic cup that's almost empty. It's not great. Then someone hits play on a Bose speaker. Heads nod, feet tap, one person dances, then everyone does. Awkward becomes electric. When Bose sound fills the room, you don't just hear the music, you feel it. Your life deserves music. Your music deserves Bose. Find your perfect product at Bose.com.
Your new hair era is here. At Sephora, you'll find carefully selected hair care products that work for your hair and take it to the next level. Your search for dream hair is over. Sephora is the place for hair care. Discover the best products that give your hair the treatment it needs from brands like Kerastase, K18, and Gisou. Plus, with free shipping and same-day delivery, there's never been a better time to trade up to healthier-looking hair. Shop hair at Sephora.
He sounds like French Marshal Ney or Murat. Just like, I'm going to go with the front with my guys.
It's just amazing stuff. And the soldiers loved him for that. The memoirs that come out of the people in the 7th Panzer Division praise him up and down. He was there with them. And it's just extraordinary stuff. And of course, that went on until the end of the 1940 campaign.
Yeah. Well, in February 1941, he's appointed commander of the Afrika Korps in North Africa. So how did Germany get involved in North Africa?
Mussolini viewed himself as the new Rome, right? The new Caesar. And as part of that, he wanted to take control of the North African shore. So he took over Libya and he attacked into Egypt, which at that time was a British possession. The British really worked him over and drove him all the way back to a place called El Agila, which is kind of at the south end of the bay there for Libya. And Mussolini appealed to Hitler for help to send in some German troops to just preserve Libya for the Italians. And so Hitler picked his favorite guy, kind of an independent, small unit, corps level. And he sent Rommel in there first with just a couple of divisions. But the mission was to help stabilize the Italians in Libya and help them defend against the Brits.
So this sounds like perfect country, a desert, it's flat for leadership and military tactics. What made Rommel stand out in this theater?
So here he is. He takes command. He's only got a couple of German divisions, not much. And then he's got some Italians under his command. And so the first, and again, his mission is simply to shore up the Italians and help protect Libya from the Germans. But I want to read from a letter that he wrote his wife. And this is from the collected letters edited by Little Hart. And this is why he attacked the first time. And I'll call this, there were 3 pulses in North Africa. The first pulse was Rommel's first attack up to Tobruk when he didn't take it. The second pulse is Rommel's second attack where he takes Tobruk and then goes on to El Alamein. And then the third pulse is the British chasing Rommel across North Africa. But here's what he wrote to his wife about why he attacked with no orders to do so. He says, "Dearest Lou, we've been attacking since the 31st with dazzling success. There'll be consternation amongst our masters in Tripoli and Rome, perhaps in Berlin too. I took the risk against all orders and instructions because the opportunity seemed favorable." Now, there's a couple ways to read this. One, whenever generals write letters home, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. They're writing it for posterity, but in this case, I believe it's absolutely accurate. And the other thing is, he must have felt pretty empowered because of his relationship with Hitler, that he could blow off the orders from the Italian theater commander, the German theater commander, and just do whatever the heck he wanted.
Well, the best defense is a good offense, right?
Well, exactly. And so on this first pulse, he really, puts it to the Brits, gets all the way to the key port city of Tobruk, which is kind of in eastern Libya, and but he couldn't take it. He wasn't prepared for the siege.
Yeah, through a series of bold offenses against the British forces, he earned the nickname the Desert Fox and became one of Germany's most famous commanders. What was the goal of the German-Italian actions, and how close did they get to it?
So the goals changed over time. The first mission was simply to defend and shore up the Italians. But after Rommel's success in those first 2 pulses, once to get to Tobruk, and then he got driven back, and the next time he got to Tobruk, and he took Tobruk, and so then he was sitting on the border with Egypt. I think the Germans were feeling more and more confident, perhaps overconfident, in their ability to defeat the Brits, no matter what the numbers were. And so they got, the mission kind of changed to gain space and time to help delay the Brits. The other factor was that Hitler and his strategy was to use North Africa as an economy of force, draw in as many British, Allied, and U.S. divisions as possible while he won the war in Russia, keep those units from invading Western Europe. He did that. I mean, at the end of the North African campaign, there were like 15 divisions, nine Brits, French, and 5 U.S. divisions tied down in North Africa until 1943. So in terms of tying them down and gaining space and time, you have to say they accomplished that.
Yeah, and I mean, the Suez Canal is critical to linking, the Brits with their empire in India. So they probably thought, well, we can't lose the Suez Canal. And Rommel's thinking, well, maybe I can get there.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that was for the third pulse where he went all the way to El Alamein. We'll talk about that in a while, but in terms of was that a good move or not? Because it turned out so poorly. But you have to say it did give space and time to hold them down, hold the Brits down in North Africa for 2 years. It kept them out of Western Europe. It let the Germans mass against Russia, but Rommel believed he could get to the Nile and cross the Suez, get to the Nile River, and then get into Palestine. He really believed that he could.
Yeah, in 1942, after capturing Tobruk, he was promoted to Field Marshal, becoming one of Germany's youngest officers to reach that rank. So why couldn't British commanders match up with Rommel at this time?
So the Brits, they kind of still used World War I organizations. They didn't do much in combined arms. I mean, there is a lot of thought about, well, maybe their equipment wasn't as good. I think you have to acknowledge that the German 88 millimeter anti-tank weapon, which is now used in anti-armor operations, was the dominant weapon in that theater. So that played a factor. But tactically, Rommel was just better with combined arms. The other thing is the Brits were still operating out of their command posts, miles or kilometers to the rear. Rommel kind of brings up another command technique. We call it saddle orders, where in an armored unit or a fast-moving unit, you're up with your tank as a commander, giving verbal orders or in-person orders to your subordinates. And I know Desert Storm, General Franks would still do that. He'd fly up in his helicopters or his vehicles to his subordinate division commanders and give them direct orders on the scene. Rommel was excellent at giving saddle orders or taking command. And whereas the Brits were still, fighting off a map.
And I think that's an excellent point. We're talking about real-time orders, real-time viewing of the situation. When you're waiting for a radio transmission, you're 30 miles back, and then you got to think about it, look at the map. By the time you issue the order, maybe it's outdated or it's too late. If Rommel's up at the front, he can do everything real time.
And that's why he continuously outmaneuvered them, is because he was there on the spot. Now, again, we'll talk later about that has consequences, right? If you're up at the front all the time, that's got some negative consequences. But it's just they ended up getting defeated. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, his North African campaign ended after the defeat of Second Battle of El Alamein, forcing a retreat from Egypt and all the way to Tunisia. So how did Monty and the British finally beat Rommel?
So this tees up, I think, what is the main criticism of Rommel. And that is that, you have the tactical level of war, which is the battle. You have the operational level of war, which is the campaign. And the strategic level is global. And so the main criticism of Rommel is that at the operational level, at the campaign level, he did not recognize there's a theory called culminating point. Wherever you're in an attack against a organized defense, at some point in that attack, even if you outnumber the enemy and you have better logistics than they do at the outset, at some point in penetrating or going against a organized defense, your combat power is going to diminish, your logistics are going to be consumed, and it's going to swing in favor of the other side of the defense. That's called the culminating point. And the idea is when you have an objective, you want to plan it so that your combat power and your logistics get you to that objective before you reach your culminating point. The criticism is that Rommel was not attuned to that. He kind of was, again, the opportunist. He'd take off. So he goes all the way across Western Libya, all the way across Egypt to El Alamein. But his fuel was coming from Tobruk and Benghazi, 1,200 miles away on the road, on a single road. And so let's just talk about fuel for a second. You have fuel trucks carrying these jerry cans, like 5-gallon cans of fuel. For a fuel truck, it's going to consume half of the fuel on that truck simply to drive it to El Alamein and back. So you're only going to have half. Some of the fuel was destroyed on the shipping in the Mediterranean before it gets to the port. Some of it would be destroyed on the road by Allied air power. Some of it wouldn't get there because of maintenance on the trucks. And so he was really at the ragged end of his logistics here.
And what is the motif of this podcast? Logistics. You could be the greatest commander in the world, but if you don't understand logistics, it's not going to happen.
And that's the key criticism. Although throughout this pulse number 2, where he attacks all the way from El Aguila in the middle of Libya, all the way across Libya, all the way across Egypt, he really only had 45 German tank battalions and then some Italian tank battalions. So he did pretty good with what he had to get there. But at the end, it just, he just ran out of logistics. He ran out of combat power.
Yeah, and he had one more victory over the Americans at Kasserine Pass, but eventually, the writing's on the wall. Hitler says, now we're pulling you out, and the rest of the Afrika Korps gets captured. I want to jump ahead to 44, just because we have so much still to cover. In 1944, he's placed in charge of defending the Atlantic coast of France against an expected Allied invasion, and played a major role in preparations for the Normandy invasion. What was his strategy and what was he allowed to implement, or did his superiors kind of get in the way?
So he had two armies, the 7th and the 15th, a total of about 24 divisions, although under strength. And there were some panzer divisions in theater. Rommel felt, because of his experience, getting their butts kicked with Allied air power in North Africa toward the end, he was convinced, and rightfully so, that if the panzer divisions were kept in the back like they did on the Eastern Front, that they would never arrive in time at the beaches or at the lodgement area, wherever the Allies decided to invade. So he wanted the panzer divisions put close up to destroy the enemy before the lodgement area was established. Rundstedt, coming from the Eastern Front, and the German general staff, not having been subjected to the U.S. and British air power, kept most of the panzer divisions in reserve, although the Panzer Division Reserve commander, a guy named Gerd von Schweppenberg, he was wounded in an air raid, remarkably, after he was on Rundstedt's side for keeping the panzers in the back. But when they tried to come up, he was wounded in an air attack. He wrote Rommel a letter saying, "Erwin, you were correct. We should have had those panzer divisions right up front near the beaches."
So just to summarize, Rommel wanted the tanks close to the beaches so they could push the Allies back into the water. Rundstedt wanted them farther back so he could apply force wherever the Allies landed, because they didn't know if it was going to be Pas-de-Calais or Normandy or wherever. And then I guess Hitler's solution was kind of like an in-between of the two?
It was. Yeah, they gave Rommel 3 panzer divisions with strings on them. He couldn't commit them without approval from Hitler's headquarters. At this point, Hitler's clearly paranoid. So it just, and in truth, a couple of the panzer divisions got there late, but they were not there in time to prevent the establishment of the beachheads and then the full lodgement area by the Brits and the U.S.
Yeah, so obviously D-Day happens June. The Allies kind of break out basically through June and July. And then we have the July plot, which was the attempted assassination of Hitler. And Rommel was forced to choose between a public trial and suicide based on his involvement in the July plot, which must have been a heartbreaking decision for him. Why do you think he was involved in this plot when he was one of Hitler's favorites just a few years ago?
I've read a lot of the Rommel sources and references and biographies and all that, and there's been a lot of recent research on this as well. Rommel became very disenchanted with Hitler in 1944, and by the conduct of the war in Russia, the conduct of the Western Front. By day 3 or 4 after the Normandy invasion, Rommel had seen enough of Hitler, and so Rommel met with a couple of the folks involved in the conspiracy. He never met directly with Stauffenberg or those that were closely involved in that bomb plot, but he did meet with those who were involved with those people repeatedly at his headquarters in France. And Rommel had agreed, the research indicates, had agreed to serve as the president of the Reich if Hitler was deposed. Rommel did not want him assassinated, so the research goes, but he said if the people take him out, or the government takes him out, or the military removes him from his leadership, he would agree to step in to stabilize the country and negotiate for peace based on his reputation. So clearly he was involved with those involved in the plot, and it was a close involvement, and he had agreed to serve in the event Hitler was deposed.
Yeah, he was forced to take poison October 14th, 1944, and was given a state funeral while the German public was told that he died from war-related injuries. So, final 2 questions for you. What is his legacy, and how culpable was he in the Holocaust?
So, a couple thoughts here. First, I've been to his house in Harlingen, where they visited him, and he gave him the choice of a state trial or taking poison. And I've been to the top of the hill above his house where they took his life, giving him poison. But on that visit, and this says a lot, I think, about his legacy. On that visit, if you go to Rommel's gravesite, which is not far away in Herlingen, the day that I visited, it was like just after the date of his death or just after his birthday or something. But there were 2 huge wreaths on it. One.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
This is a Bose moment. You've been there before. Somebody's apartment, small talk that's going nowhere, plastic cup that's almost empty. It's not great. Then someone hits play on a Bose speaker. Heads nod, feet tap, one person dances, then everyone does. Awkward becomes electric. When Bose sound fills the room, you don't just hear the music, you feel it. Your life deserves music. Your music deserves Bose. Find your perfect product at Bose.com.
Your new hair era is here. At Sephora, you'll find carefully selected hair care products that work for your hair and take it to the next level. Your search for dream hair is over. Sephora is the place for hair care. Discover the best products that give your hair the treatment it needs from brands like Kerastase, K18, and Gisou. Plus, with free shipping and same-day delivery, there's never been a better time to trade up to healthier-looking hair. Shop hair at Sephora.
Was from the French embassy and one was from the British embassy, which was surprising to me, but they still respect him. And so in terms of legacy, there are those that say, well, he was overrated. The Brits created this super general to make up for all their screw ups and all their failures on their end. And so they had to create this Desert Fox super general motif. And here's where I stand. I think you can look at it in 2 different buckets. The first is the bucket of tactical battlefield command. And I know we like to talk these days about the GOAT or about Hall of Fame or about, lists and who's at the top of the list. Rommel was extraordinary, a genius at the tactical level. I think at the operational level, at the campaign level, I'm not sure so much. I mean, you look at his main attacks after 1940 when the whole German army was involved. But on his own, the first pulse, Rommel got beat by the Brits at Tobruk and sent back. The second pulse, he goes to El Alamein. Essentially, it destroys his entire army. The retreat from El Alamein, the 1,500 miles back to Libya, I mean, he goes from 116,000 soldiers down to 20,000, from 200 tanks down to 20. I mean, it wipes his entire army out. And then the third attack at Kasserine, I mean, the Americans always look at that as a major defeat, but I'm not sure what the point of Kasserine was. It was just kind of a thrust. He talked about trying to cut off some American troops north of the penetration, but he didn't have near the combat power to do that against 3 or 4 American divisions. And so he really, at the operational level, I'm not sure you'd rate him very highly. With the Holocaust, a lot of groundbreaking research has taken place recently. Wehrmacht units under his command did participate in pogroms in Libya and in Tunisia. Been well-documented cases of looting and executions by Wehrmacht units in those areas. I suppose the most damning indicator here is that when he attacked in pulse number 2, all the way across Libya and Egypt, going for the Suez Canal, he was coordinating with a group called Einsatz Group Rauf, or Einsatz Group Egypt. This is by a guy named Walter Rauf. He's the guy that developed mobile gas chambers. And so Rauf and Rommel's staff, Rauf was under Rommel's command during that attack into Egypt. And had Rommel made it across the Suez, across the Nile, and into Palestine, where 500,000 Jews were, Ralph and his Einsatz group were going to go in to Palestine. And we know what would have happened then. And so that is some pretty damning research that's come out lately.
Yeah, and it's not like he wasn't around Hitler and didn't know his ideologies. He was around Hitler a lot. And
Exactly.
And to publicly support him. Now, he did get involved in the plot, but I don't think that was to save Jews. That was to save Germany.
It was to preserve his country, right? That's what it was. I think Rommel is viewed by a lot of folks as well. Since he was involved in the plot, he must have been kind of pure of heart. And the truth is a lot more murky than that, given his experience in North Africa.
But what you just said with the wreaths on his graves from the British and French embassies, I mean, I know they like to respect their enemies, but it just shows that he clearly had some talent, and even opponents recognize his talent.
At the tactical level, and we still do. I mean, there's, I don't know what percentage, but probably every tank and armored cavalry officer as a lieutenant or as a company grade officer is going to hear about Rommel, read about him, study him, or whatever. At the tactical level, he was bar none at the very top of the list in battlefield command. You have to say that. And he was always with his troops. You can't really criticize someone who's there with the troops.
Yeah, and the bravery was evident in World War I with his award. So, he wasn't shy about getting up there.
No, sir.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Kris. Always good stuff. I learned a lot right there. Again, please check out the National Armor and Cavalry Heritage Foundation, which Kris is a board member of. And the website, again, is armorcavalryheritagefoundation.org. And Kris, we thank you for your time. This was terrific.
Booking.com is the easiest way from a day surrounded by noise to a stay surrounded by nature. That's nice. Go on, book it. It's easy. Booking.com. Booking.yeah.
Close your eyes, exhale, feel your body relax, and let go of whatever you're carrying today.
Well, I'm letting go of the worry that I wouldn't get my new contacts in time for this class. I got them delivered free from 1-800-CONTACTS. Oh my gosh, they're so fast.
And breathe.
Oh, sorry. I almost couldn't breathe when I saw the discount they gave me on my first order. Oh, sorry. Namaste.
Visit 1-800-CONTACTS.com today to save on your first order.
1-800-CONTACTS.
Thank you, John.